Welcome to A Year of War and Peace. I'm your host, Brian E. Denton. A Year of War and Peace is a daily, year-long, chapter-by-chapter reading of and meditation on Leo Tolstoy's epic novel, War and Peace. In these videos and podcasts, you'll be treated to a free reading of one chapter per day of the novel, plus a reflective essay I've written individually tailored to that day's chapter. These readings are offered for free, though if you'd like to support me, you can do so in one of three ways. First, you could purchase my ebook, A Year of War and Peace. It features the entire novel, plus all of my reflective essays, and it's only $2.99 on Amazon.com. You could also become a patron at patreon.com/BrianEDenton. If you sign up there, you'll receive a sonnet once a month, plus a link to an ebook of my collected sonnets. Finally, if you like, you can make a one-time donation to my PayPal account. The email there is brianedenton@gmail.com. You can also use that email to contact me. I'd be happy to hear from you. Your support is greatly appreciated.
Today's reading and reflection is on Chapter 236. Chapter 236. In the middle of this fresh tale, Pierre was summoned to the commander-in-chief. When he entered the private room, Count Raspatchin, puckering his face, was rubbing his forehead and eyes with his hand. A short man was saying something, but when Pierre entered, he stopped speaking and went out. "Ah, how do you do, great warrior?" said Raspatchin, as soon as the short man had left the room. "We have heard of your prowess, but that's not the point. Between ourselves, mon cher, do you belong to the Masons?" he went on severely, as though there were something wrong about it, which he nevertheless intended to pardon. Pierre remained silent. "I am well informed, my friend. But I am aware that there are Masons, and I hope that you are not one of those who, on pretense of saving mankind, wish to ruin Russia." "Yes, I am a Mason," Pierre replied. "There, you see, mon cher. I expect you know that Speransky and Magnitsky have been deported to their proper place. Mr. Klyucharev has been treated in the same way, and so have others who, on the plea of building up the Temple of Solomon, have tried to destroy the temple of their fatherland. You can understand that there are reasons for this, and that I could not have exiled the postmaster had he not been a harmful person. It has now come to my knowledge that you lent him your carriage for his removal from town, and that you have accepted papers from him for safe custody. I like you, and don't wish you any harm, and, as you are only half my age, I advise you, as a father would, to cease all communication with men of that stamp, and to leave here as soon as possible." "But what did Klyucharev do wrong, Count?" asked Pierre. "That is for me to know, but not for you to ask," shouted Raspatchin. "If he is accused of circulating Napoleon's proclamation, it does not prove that he did so," said Pierre without looking at Raspatchin. "And Vereshchagin—" "There we are!" Raspatchin shouted at Pierre louder than before, frowning suddenly. "Vereshchagin is a renegade and a traitor who will be punished as he deserves," said he, with the vindictive heat with which people speak when recalling an insult. "But I did not summon you here to discuss my actions, but to give you advice, or an order, if you prefer it. I beg you to leave the town and break off all communications with these men." "And I will knock the nonsense out of anybody!" But, probably realizing that he was shouting at Bezukhov, who so far was not guilty of anything, he added, taking Pierre's hand in a friendly manner, "We are on the eve of a public disaster, and I haven't time to be polite to everybody who has business with me. My head is sometimes in a whirl. Well, mon cher, what are you doing personally?" "Why, nothing," answered Pierre, without raising his eyes or changing the thoughtful expression of his face. The Count frowned. "A word of friendly advice, mon cher. Be off as soon as you can. That's all I have to tell you. Happy he who has ears to hear. Goodbye, my dear fellow. Oh, by the by," he shouted through the doorway after Pierre, "is it true that the Countess has fallen into the clutches of the Holy Fathers of the Society of Jesus?" Pierre did not answer, and left Raspatchin's room more sullen and angry than he had ever before shown himself. When he reached home, it was already getting dark. Some 8 people had come to see him that evening: the secretary of a committee, the colonel of his battalion, his steward, his major domo, and various petitioners. They all had business with Pierre and wanted decisions from him. Pierre did not understand and was not interested in any of these questions, and only answered them in order to get rid of these people. When left alone at last, he opened and read his wife's letter. They, the soldiers at the battery, Prince Andrew killed, that old man, simplicity is submission to God, suffering is necessary, the meaning of all, one must harness, my wife is getting married, one must forget and understand. And going to his bed, he threw himself on it without undressing and immediately fell asleep. When he awoke next morning, the major domo came to inform him of a special messenger, a police officer, who had come from Count Rasputin to know whether Count Bezukov had left or was leaving the town. A dozen persons who had business with Pierre were waiting him in the drawing room. Pierre dressed hurriedly, and instead of going to see them, went to the back porch and out through the gate. From that time to the end of the destruction of Moscow, no one of Bezukov's household, despite all the search they made, saw Pierre again, or knew where he was. All right, that concludes my reading of chapter 236. I will now proceed to my reflection on the same. A Year of War and Peace, Day 236. Pierre Bezukov and the Practical Practice. Galen, physician to Marcus Aurelius, believed that the best doctors must also be philosophers. What reason, Galen wrote, remains why the doctor who practices the art in a manner worthy of Hippocrates should not be a philosopher? For since in order to discover the nature of the body and the distinctions between diseases and the indications for remedies, he must exercise his mind in rational thought, and since, so that he may persevere laboriously in the practice of these things, he must despise riches and exercise temperance, he must already possess all the parts of philosophy, the logical, the scientific, and the ethical. The philosopher, just as much as the physician, must keep a practice. To keep his practice, the physician commits to frequent continuing medical education. The philosopher, likewise, must keep his practice current. One prescription Galen offers to achieve this goal is the regular daily recitation of the golden verses of Pythagoras. The habitual repetition of philosophical precepts, Galen argues, keeps the mind contemplative and mindful of temperance, logic, and ethics. A contemplative and mindful intellect is exactly what Pierre Bezukov needs today as he meets with Count Rasputin and then returns home to some bad news. First, Pierre endures the sore rankles of Rasputin, who all but accuses him of being a traitor, in league with his fellow Masons in liberal rebellion against the Russian Imperium. When he returns home, keep in mind he's had no proper rest since attending the horrifying Battle of Borodino, he suffers the nettlesome petitions of various Muscovites. Finally, as if all this wasn't enough for one day, he reads the letter his wife wrote him informing him of their divorce. It's enough to make anyone go mad. But Pierre doesn't lose his mind. Instead, he focuses it. Just like Galen would have prescribed, he recalls the philosophy of his dream. The outrages of his day ring in his mind, but Pierre meets them with a repetition of what he has learned. Simplicity is submission to God. Suffering is necessary. The meaning of all. One must forget and understand. Pierre could just as easily have given in to his frustration. He could have raged against his misfortune and lost his mind in rabid anger. Instead, like Seneca's admonition to treat the malady of anger as soon as it is discovered, Pierre strengthens his mind with a healthy dose of self-medication. He recites his guiding philosophy until he's calm enough to sleep. This mindful moment is one we could all learn from. Daily meditation. To let one's mind go lax is, in effect, to lose it. Musonius Rufus, Sayings.